now. And you probably need to click on the OK. And we're going to move into our focus on the main element of today's meeting, which is approving the final draft of the report. Next slide, please. So reviewing the report, we're going to talk about the presentation schedule. There's several presentations coming up with the Health Equity Committee and the Healthcare Workforce Committee. We're going to be looking for people to volunteer to present, and then we'll wrap up. That's where we're going. Next slide, please. In this group, we've had these working agreements to take space and make space. Being mindful of what we pay attention to, confidentiality, take the lessons learned, leave the details, practice yes and, both and, holding space for multiple truths, reduce gatekeeping or exclusion, which includes limiting or explaining acronyms that you use, value the process as well as the outcomes. Be aware of intention and impact and attend to both. Remember why we're doing this work, because it matters. Practice grace, have fun, and be present. So these are the working agreements that we've been using for these meetings. Any questions or comments? Anybody who feels like they can't live within these for the next hour or so? Thank you. Next slide, please. So we're going to review the report, which is going to mean quite a bit of scrolling through the report. I think that you've all gotten the report electronically, so if you don't want to look at it on the screen in the Zoom, you hopefully have your own copy. If you don't, please let us know. And I think at this point, we're going to switch from Jessica's screen sharing to Cindy's screen sharing so that we can go through the report. I'll say that, I think I saw Stephanie. Did you get to introduce yourself? I think you might have just joined. Is that right, Stephanie? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if there were specific things that you wanted us to say, because I did come in late, but I'm Stephanie Green. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer at Adapt Integrated Healthcare in Roseburg, Oregon.
Thank you. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So Cindy, you're now sharing your screen. You're going to scroll us through this. Do you want to say anything about the table of contents or kind of how you organize this? I know most people have seen it. Not sure if everybody's had a chance to review of it. Do you want to kind of give us an orientation, Cindy?
Sure thing. The overview being trying to keep the executive summary to as few pages as possible, but also to put the recommendations up front, and then going through a bit of the background and how the group was formed and the process of the group, the role of us as consultants helping to facilitate. I added the part with considerations coming before the recommendations to really emphasize that while this group did do what was asked of them with coming up with the recommendations, that really the main consideration being that this should be the work of the ongoing gender affirming care group moving forward, and then a conclusion of wrapping that up and restating that as well, and then a couple things that are in the appendix. The compilation of recommendation refinement work was that big homework assignment that you all spent tons of time and energy on. So that'll be there as the repository for the future group.
Thanks. So the summary, the executive summary is meant to be a one-pager that kind of tells anybody who wants to get a quick sense of what the group did. There's a key recommendation but this is kind of the summary. Thank you. I'm having a little trouble reading.
I know,
So
should I make it bigger? Is it
if
looking okay?
you make it a little bigger, that would be great, but also it might be good if you can read it.
Okay. Yeah, I think this was a piece that came in on this, last revision was to make this as a leading recommendation is the establishment of the ongoing Gender Affirming Care Advisory Committee and to emphasize it should be composed of a majority of community members with lived experience receiving gender affirming care to continue this work using inclusive and community engagement practices that center community expertise and that the committee members must represent the full diversity of gender affirming care patients in Oregon with concerted outreach to gender affirming care patients with intersecting identities, including those who are people of color, tribally affiliated, live in rural areas, have disabilities, are OHP members, are unhoused, and or are immigrants. And then this is just a piece to say where we've developed preliminary recommendations for training, hiring, and retention while identifying goals, action steps, potential resources, and avenues for community engagement to implement these recommendations with attention to equity and anti-racism. These preliminary recommendations were developed in a process that did not include or center certain people most directly affected by access to gender affirming care. Aside from the formation of a gender affirming care advisory committee, these preliminary recommendations are intended to serve as a foundation from which the gender affirming care advisory committee may determine their future course of action.
Thank you. So any thoughts or comments about that? This is just really a recitation of and a summary of the work and the recommendations that have come from this group over time. Any comments on the executive summary?
Hi, this is Yulia. I really appreciate this language being in here. I might just ask that some of it be more visually kind of highlighted, potentially, with sort of the main piece around, for example, the recommendations were developed in a process that did not include or center certain people. Like that might be bolded simply because it's such a key part of what we want to convey.
Thanks, Yulia. Other comments? Okay, scrolling. So the first section is short-term recommendations that don't require legislative action, which is what Cindy was just reading, the formation of ongoing gender affirming care advisory committee charged with developing comprehensive community-driven long-term legislative and policy recommendations that has equitable compensation practices, members representative of trans, non-binary, and gender diverse patients, providers, and allies with lived experience with gender affirming care, including from Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other communities of color and rural areas of the state, with a clear purpose, role, and decision-making power within organizational structures of OHA. That's our first one. I think I'm not going to read them all out loud. I think that would be probably deeply annoying, and I'm assuming that people have copies of it. So the next section is the workforce development training category. Section 3 is workforce development, recruitment, hiring, and retention. Section 4 is organizational changes. Section 5 is access to gender affirming care. Any comments about that first section? Other comments? Again, I think this is not new. You've seen most of this before, or you've seen all of it before.
I had one comment, which is that there's been a trend to try and not use pipeline specifically because so many people in healthcare do not have a linear track that they have taken, and that they started here and they ended up there and there was no deviation. And so pathway is probably a little bit more of a good word, I think, to use. And there's a couple places in the report where we could substitute that out.
Thank you.
I will make a note to search to change pipeline to pathway. in other, wherever else. I will search that out in the document. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. That's great. Other comments on this first section? Okay. The second section is as I said to somebody who needs to leave early, you can also give us comments by email if you have them. But we were hoping to move toward an ability to approve this by the end of today's meeting. So keeping those things in mind, please do speak up. Or put something in the chat if that's more comfortable. So the second section is the introduction, the background, Dr. Hathi sending the letter, the process of the meetings, the staff, OHA staff included, organizations represented, list of organizations represented in the work group. So this is just a recitation or a listing of who was involved and what we did, the meetings. Scrolling.
Actually, I think we have a hand up.
I'm sorry, Yulia.
Okay.
I didn't see it. Thanks, Cindy. Go ahead, Yulia.
Hi, all. Sorry, it's always me. And I apologize. I didn't have a chance to review this. I lost somebody very close to me, so I'm just coming out of grief as well. But are still in it, really. One thing I just want to mention that this process actually started with the Health Equity Committee's letter to OHPB as the originating, that then got up to OHPB and then to the director. So I would just want to acknowledge that initiating letter in the background. And again, sorry that I didn't.
No, that's
Oh,
great.
there it is. It is in the appendix.
Moved to,
Right.
I just clicked over to the appendix. It was suggested to move that to
Perfect.
the appendix, so it wasn't top heavy here.
Yeah, works. I just want to make sure it was acknowledged somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, sorry, I didn't have a chance.
No, happy to have the input. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Yulia. I'm sorry to hear about your loss. Okay. So, and thank you, Cindy, for identifying where that was preserved, that history was preserved. Okay, scrolling down. This is the structure of the work group. This graphic, I think everybody's probably seen before. Scrolling. So this is what happened at each meeting when they occurred, what the kind of very high level summary of what was discussed. We are today on January 8th, workgroup meeting 6. Again, please unmute or put something in the chat or raise your hand if you have a comment. Scrolling. So this is what Michael and Cindy and I were asked to do, section C. Number 3, considerations. Cindy, do you want to do a summary of that?
Or should I read this part just to make sure it's landing okay? I think that not too long here. In the absence of broadly inclusive community engagement, these preliminary recommendations were developed in a process that did not include people with lived experience and those most directly affected by access to gender affirming care. The Healthcare Workforce Gender Affirming Care Provider Work Group recommends the formation of an ongoing GAC advisory committee be made the top priority. The rest of the recommendations are suggestions for the future committee to explore. The Healthcare Workforce Gender Affirming Care Provider Work Group has identified opportunities and needs. The recommendation refinement compilation is in the appendix of the report to serve the future committee.
Thank you. Scrolling. Okay, so now we're into the recommendation section 4. Yulia. Some of us here likely have experience with gender affirming care, but we represent a tiny sliver of the larger community. Thank you for noting that. Yeah.
So maybe just a slight language change that it's more, we need more representation, because I also don't want us to erase potential experiences that folks have had on this committee.
Would like include a majority of people? Because I don't know if
Or
that
did not maybe include sort of the full breadth and depth of people or communities with lived experience or something along those lines, where it's just like recognizing that there's a lot of different folks from different communities who are impacted by this.
Thank you. This is exactly why we wanted to review this with everyone. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments about the considerations? We're moving to recommendations.
We're good. Okay.
Yep, moving to recommendations. So there are lots of recommendations. Yulia, thank you for showing up for this review. We appreciate your thoughtfulness and your giving your brain power to this. So the recommendation 1.1 is the one that what you've already heard about that was in the executive summary. So this one you've seen and heard, and we just read through it. The goals: form a gender affirming care advisory committee with diverse membership, and for people seeking gender affirming care to see themselves represented in decision-making spaces. This is goals for 1.1.
And this comes out of the homework pretty much directly.
So lots of, again, not going to try and read all of this. You all have copies, but this also has not changed much since our last meeting when you saw all of this. There have been some additions, but again, you've probably seen most of it. Okay, scrolling. Again, hand raised, chat, unmute if you want to make comments.
Oh, I think one thing too, in case anyone is curious to just see what might have changed from one to the other, there's that initial rough draft that went out and changes were made on that. And then, but then I didn't, that document is still in existence and preserved if you want to go back and look at it. And then there's a second draft that went out. So you could kind of see, or if you want to go in the revision history, if you're curious about the changes.
Now we're at sections 2, which is workforce development training. And there are a bunch of different recommendations in this space. Do you want to scroll? So goals to demystify gender affirming care, connect life-saving and mental health benefits of gender affirming care, people seeking gender affirming care to have more access, providers' gender affirming care skills are assessed and documented, to increase awareness of gender minority stress model. So these are some training goals. Continued funding creation of training, promoting trainings, encouraging medical continuing education units, providing gender affirming care helpline for providers, develop statewide competency standards, making sure that trainings address both WPATH and informed consent models to care. Continuing with those goals, sharing why these are important, and keeping the conversation aligned. The next section is workforce development. The category is recruitment, hiring, and retention. Many recommendations in this section 3. Scrolling. Identified goals as attracting qualified candidates with lived experience or demonstrated commitment to gender affirming care, support healthcare providers to avoid burnout. Many suggestions for implementation actions. Scrolling.
We have a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Megan.
I do see that there's been a significant effort made to reduce acronyms, but there's still quite a bit. Is there a possibility of having that in the appendix, an explanation that would be an easy place for people to look for what those might mean?
That's a great idea.
Could add a glossary.
Yeah, add a glossary. Yeah. Thank you, Megan. That's really helpful. Yeah. Okay, we can do that. Scrolling. So this is section 4, which is organizational changes. The goal to provide educational and peer support for school-based health center staff, SBHC, school-based health center. And scrolling. bunch of suggested implementation actions. So in all of these, we have these categories: implementation actions, potential resources, obstacles and opportunities, anti-racism and equity, and community engagement. Other thoughts, questions, comments? Okay. The next section is the access section. Section 5, goal to increase usage of telehealth for providing gender affirming care. And again, many suggestions for actions, resources, obstacles and opportunities, community engagement. Scrolling. Okay. And then we have the conclusion. Cindy, you want to do the?
Sure, I'll read it. The healthcare workforce gender affirming care provider work group acknowledges that the process and development of these preliminary recommendations are an important first step in increasing protections, accessibility, and trainings for gender affirming care in Oregon. This aligns with OHA's goal of eliminating health inequities by 2030. The work group expects that these preliminary recommendations will evolve over time with the creation of the ongoing Gender Affirming Care Advisory Committee.
Thank you. Any other comments? So excellent. Thank you, Yulia. The appendix, you want to just walk us through? There's a lot in the appendix. You want to just?
Sure. There was a lot more background that I had been pulling in that does go with the full generation of how this came about from the Health Equity Committee and the initial response coming back from Dr. Hothy. And these are straight from the letters. I just went through and pulled all the details from that. And then just pulled that out from being top heavy in the report. So it focused on what this group was charged with. And then this will be a hyperlink to the survey that you all did, and then the compilation of the recommendation refinement.
Thank you, Cindy.
When you say, oh, sorry, this is Yulia. When you say compilation of recommendation refinement work, what does that entail exactly, or what does that mean exactly?
It's essentially this, but do y'all remember the big, like y'all had done the homework? It's like in an omnibus one. I can't remember how many pages it is, but it's in a whole document of all the contributions as they came in. So it's basically here. I tried to put it into a format, that could kind of come into these tables. So it's living in two places, but I think there might be, I didn't want to lose, like there's some level of detail that I can't be captured as concisely as on a table. So I wanted to make sure that repository was available for the future group as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So with the adjustments that we've discussed, the next question to you all is, do you want to approve this? I think the way, thank you, Meg. I want to acknowledge the immense lift that Cindy did and the incredible number of hours and attention to detail and language and craft. I really appreciate Cindy's work. Alex, I see your hand.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is Alex. Just checking you can still hear me. Feels like a low noise than before. Oh, good? Okay, great. I just noticed one thing that stood out to me in like the kind of, I know that the recommendations were based on, or specifically the columns after the recommendations were based on the homework input, and then we lost a little bit of steam often for some of the later recommendations. Just one part that stood out to me was that final recommendation 5, and in the anti-racism and equity column, that there's nothing in there. And I feel like I would love to just put in there it's access to gender affirming care. Just maybe one bullet point that's like, ensure that feedback or data gathered about access efforts are, following REAL-D and SOGI guidelines. They will make sure that we can, analyze based on that information, that, have granular data. Just something like that, because I don't think that, that was because there is no anti-racism or equity. It's just that I think we have many different things that we were balancing. So yeah, that's my suggestion. Just make sure there's one bullet point there.
Thank you, Alex. That makes a lot of sense. Appreciate that. And it does make sense to, and Yulia's asking, can we screen share, Cindy, that last part that Alex is talking about so that we can add that language? That means going back to the report. I think it's section 5. Is that right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I in that second go, folks did a really great job of filling this out more, because there was a lot of lift there. But I think where we are is, sorry, I hope I'm not making y'all dizzy. We had a blank here. And Alex, I was just noting, following REAL-D and SOGI data collection, something to that effect?
Do you scroll up just a tiny
I'm
bit
just-
so I can see what it's nested under? Thank you.
Oh yeah.
And I'm typing that up in the chat, so I can just send that in.
Okay,
just
great.
Kind of my first draft, and you people approve that type of language, for that to make any adjustments. Just give me 1 second.
Of course.
Excellent catch, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. We'll look for it in the chat and then we can add it.
Hi, I'm looking at the document, or doing a quick search of the document, or this the draft that was sent over to us, and I know that there was a specific, let's see what section it is, on making a recommendation for legislative change for increasing protection, and I think it's kind of worded out in different places, but I don't know if, well, one of the things I'm recommending is maybe explicitly saying also protection for providers. So just knowing that the new administration coming in, I think that there's going to be a risk for not only obviously our community, but then also the providers that are providing the care as well, similar to reproductive health that's happening right now. And so I don't know if we need to be more explicit on that, and actually say it out.
Yeah. Thanks, Koivu. That's a great addition. So we can add language around protection for providers as well. Okay, and Alex put the language in the chat. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I might even go further, protection to parents with minor children as well.
Yulia added for the anti-racism and equity section, ensure equitable resource distribution to communities and organizations serving marginalized communities, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Alex added in the chat, ensure that feedback and data on gender-affirming care access, gender-affirming care efforts follow REAL-D SOGI data collection standards to track progress on addressing health inequities for specific to STNB and intersexual populations. So we can add both of those. That's fine, Alex. We can edit. Thank you. And thank you, Koivu, for adding the protections, thoughts, and language around protections for providers and parents. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay, Cindy, if you want to stop sharing, we'll go back to looking for approval. So I would like to, uh, Jessica, Jessica, why don't you hold off on screen sharing for the minute? And we'll just look, we'll be able to just see all the little boxes of us all. And yes, Rebecca gave a thumbs up. So if you can give a thumbs up, or if you're on camera and you want to raise your hand, if you're a work group member and you want to indicate your approval, it would be great for us to see that. Koivu, Yulia, Megan, thumbs up, hands up. Rebecca already did that. Other Danielle, I see your thumb up in real life. Alex's thumbs up. Beck's thumbs up. Anybody else want to respond to the draft report?
Oh, I would love to approve it, but I'm not a member of the healthcare workforce, so I'm gonna be quiet. Watch this.
Okay. Thank you, Meg. All right. I think, Stephanie, I didn't see your hand or thumb. Do you have a thought about approving the report? Maybe not able to respond at the moment. Okay. So I think that the group has approved the report. Stephanie said in the chat, I can confirm approval. Thank you, Stephanie. So we have an approved report. We will make the changes that we discussed today. The next thing that we need to move into, so now we do need to go back to the PowerPoint. Jessica, if you would start. Oh, I like the hats with the confetti, and yes, that's lovely. And I do want to acknowledge that it was a lot of contributions from a lot of people, right? This took all of your brains. Kwivu, I see your hand up. Is that still from voting, or do you have a comment? Okay. All right. Next slide, please, Jessica. This is a huge achievement, Alex said in the chat. Thank you. Presentation schedule. Next slide, please. So we have some presentations coming up, and we're going to be asking for volunteers who would be willing to present on this topic and the kind of the summary of the report at these meetings coming up. So February 12th, from 9:30 to 11, the Healthcare Workforce Committee, and it would be great if there were members of the Healthcare Workforce Committee who'd be willing to present. Do we have people who are willing to volunteer? Again, you can raise your hand, you can put your name in the chat.
And Elena, if I can say, Rowena, I'm sorry. I was thinking about Elena, who's not here, who's part of the Healthcare Workforce Committee and offered, and we would welcome others who would want to join as well.
Thanks, Neela. So Elena is willing to present. Is there somebody who's willing to present with Elena on February 12th? Beck and Yulia?
I thought you were only looking for volunteers who serve on the Health Care Workforce Committee for the February 12th, right? Or is it any, or, sorry, who are you looking for?
Yulia, I was looking if somebody wanted to work with Elena to do that presentation. In a minute, I'm going to ask you about the Health Equity Committee presentation. So you could think about that one. But yes, I was just asking for the Healthcare Workforce Committee first. And now I'm going to ask you about the Health Equity Committee, who would be willing to present this report at the Health Equity Committee on February 13th at noon to 2.
And again, you're just, sorry, I may be misunderstanding stuff, but you're just looking for HEC members, for Health Equity Committee members who can present?
It's not,
Or
it doesn't.
anybody from this workforce can present, from this work group can present to any of them.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I may be available on the 12th, then let me look, and I could do the 13th as well. But also, Beck, given that you're the liaison, also super happy to be in a supportive role.
Thank you. Neelam.
Yeah, I just wanted to address your question, Yulia. We had ideally wanted at least one person from the Healthcare Workforce Committee and one person from the Health Equity Committee to be available at each of these presentations, if possible, recognizing that you all are very busy and involved with multiple efforts.
I'm happy to jump in on the February 12th one. But also, Beck, again, let me know if that makes sense to you.
I have some tentative out of office time for those 2 days. It's unconfirmed right now. So I am a maybe. If you're available, that would be amazing. I can't commit to it at this particular moment.
Sure. How about I hold it too as like I can do it, and then if you're like, actually, I'm going to be around and you'd prefer to, then I will just take it off my calendar, but I'll take it as a hold for now.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. And Meg is also offering to help support. So Meg, would you be willing to be part of the presenting? Is that what you're offering? I want to make sure I understand.
And I'm also part of the Healthcare Workforce Committee, and I can also support that on February 12th. So I think you have a couple options here. So I think just let us know who are the best folks.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd go with Koivu.
Thank you, Koivu. Okay, so we have some volunteers for both the 12th and the 13th. March 4th, there's a presentation to OHPB. Do we have volunteers for that one? Are there some of you all who would be willing? Neelam?
I wanted to mention too that Levi Anderson has volunteered for either the Health Equity Committee or the OHPB meeting in case no one else from the Healthcare Workforce Committee is available to present. I wanted to specifically mention it because Levi had to leave.
Thank you, Neelam.
I can, depending on the timing on March 4th, I can rep the heck. But again, Beck, let me know how that lands for you. Since I think, Beck, you and I are the only two heck members right now on this committee. Is that correct, Alex? Yeah. Okay, great. So happy to do it. I think I can make most of that time, but as soon as we kind of know where it is in the agenda, that would be super helpful.
Yeah.
Do you have any constraints? Because I can communicate that to the OHPB staff.
Thank you so much. Between 9 and 11:30 should work for me. Before that and after that might get a little dicey.
I will let them know.
Great. Now put a hold in my calendar for that for now.
Great.
Thanks. Okay, thank you, everyone. We have a list. Danielle put in the chat. Thank you for presenting. I have conflicts with the dates, but a fun fact, March 4th is my favorite date because it's a verb. I love that. That just might have been the best thing that happened to me today. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, next slide, please. So this is our next steps in closing. Next slide, please. So we usually do a plus delta, what went well, what could have gone better for our meeting today. I can tell you my camera is falling off my computer. What went well, what could have gone better, any next steps, and then so we want feedback on how today's meeting went. And then our last closing activity will be a word on how you're feeling as we leave the space. So let's do the plus delta first, and then we'll ask everybody how you're feeling as we leave the space. Yulia said, I need to jump now. Thank you. It was wonderful to work with you all, and I deeply appreciate all of you. Thank you, Yulia, and we really appreciate you too. Thank you. Any comments about today's meeting or the process? What went well or could have gone better for anybody in the group? Process or content? How we worked together or the work we got done? Any comments about today's meeting? Beck, you have to hop off. Thank you.
I'll just start that it just throughout the whole process I did still I know I think a lot of folks mentioned this before, so it just felt really rushed in the last couple months, and that I feel that we've been incredibly productive because of a short timeline as well. And so I just really appreciate learning from everyone, and you know, being in the space with you all.
Thank you, Kovu. Megan said, excellent work from all of you, feeling optimistic and energized. Alex.
I think this is Alex, and just wanted to give a what went well is that I just think that your team, Alana, Cindy, and Michael, always model for me what it means to be really receptive, and that regardless of kind of what people say or what people think, you really practice that yes and both, and you know, really just always willing to add to the incredible work that you're doing. I think that I've seen how that makes people feel included, and so just really great, and again, inspiring work.
Thanks, Alex. Okay.
I'd like to chime in just briefly if I could. I don't have anything that we could have done better today. I thought it was a beautiful job facilitating this meeting again. And what went well for us as a group, I enjoyed the review. I enjoyed having the opportunity to do a little in-depth review. And Cindy, thank you for all your patience with my weird things that I put in comments. And you're like, what the heck are you doing? And how am I leaving how am I feeling as I leave this space? I'm incredibly proud of the work of this group and absolutely determined to see this through. So thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Other comments Danielle put in the chat. I really appreciate the opportunity to review together and hear things as well as read them. The process has been so organized and the facilitation has been superb. Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Other comments or thoughts from folks about how you're feeling as we leave this space? Cindy wrote, your contributions were absolutely essential. Thank you all. Closing words or thoughts from anybody else?
March 4th, everyone. March 4th. Here we go.
Thank you.
This is Alex, and my word is acting a little giddy right now, which is fun way to feel. And sorry, let me just ask one clarifying question as I'm just thinking about the presentation. The slides, are those going to come out? Are the presentation people going to meet separately to kind of go over that? I just think maybe I missed that.
Yeah, I think we have to figure that out. We have a little time to figure that out, what you want the slides to look like, if you want support putting together slides, if you want to do a quick huddle to rehearse the presentation, like we have a little time to figure that out. Yeah, thanks, Alex. Mackenzie, feeling lots of gratitude for each of you, your generous contributions and spirits. Thank you. Grateful to the hard work that went into this. Thank you, Stephanie. Michael, great work all. Grateful for everyone's contributions and willingness to come together and do this work on a short timeline. Yes, very short timeline. Other thoughts or comments about the work or our wrap up? Okay. Thank you so much. We work with so many groups, and this group has just been exceptionally thoughtful and committed and engaged It's been delightful to work with you all and really, really honored to be part of lifting up this work and trying to make gender affirming care an inclusive and widely available service for everybody in the state. So thank you so much for your work on this. And we really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Look forward to the presentations. Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.